Assalamu alaikum dear students. In this lecture we are going to study about the two basic concepts that are related to the research. The very first is the constructs and the variables. So these are the very important concepts in any type of research. So let's see the lecture outline. So in this lecture we are going to study what are the constructs, and then what is a variable, and then some types of the variable. So let's begin the lecture. So now first, what is a construct? In any research, a construct is an abstraction that cannot be observed directly. It is a concept invented to explain behavior. Examples of educational constructs are intelligence, personality, teacher effectiveness, creativity, ability, achievement, and motivation. To be measurable, constructs must be operationally defined, that is, defined in terms of processes or operations that can be observed and measured. To measure a construct, it is necessary to identify the scores or values it can assume. For example, the construct personality can be made measurable by defining two personality types, introverts and extroverts, as measured by scores on a 30-item questionnaire, with a high score indicating a more introverted personality and a low score indicating a more extroverted personality. So basically what the construct is, it's actually basically related to the theoretical concept, whatever concept the researcher has in mind, that is basically that cannot be measured in terms of figures, in terms of numbers, or in terms of analysis. These are just the concept related to the behavior, or we can say these are just the mental concepts. The every concept that we have in our mind, that is a construct. Like the personality of anyone is a construct. The creativity, the ability, achievement, and motivation are all constructs. These are all the concepts which a researcher has in mind that are related to the theory, or we can say the theoretical function. So a construct is an abstract form. Unless a construct cannot be measured, if a construct can be measured, it becomes a variable. So before its measurement, like for example, if we have to measure the personality is a mental concept. So what we do, we make scales, we develop a questionnaire that we set a mind that okay, those who get low scores in this questionnaire would be more extroverted personality in personal behavior, and the people who get high scores in a questionnaire would be more introverted in personal behavior. So see how we can measure the mental concept personality. So now let's move towards variable. Similarly, the construct of teacher effectiveness may be operationally defined by observing a teacher in action and judging effectiveness based on 4 levels: unsatisfactory, marginal, adequate, and excellent. When constructs are operationally defined, they become variables. Variables are created. What are variables? That are created by developing the construct into a measurable form. Variables by definition correspond to any characteristic that varies. So meaning they have at least two possible values. So by the word variable means any concept or anything that changes, that varies. The variable must be able to take on at least two values or scores. We deal with variables in all our research studies. For example, gender is a variable, ethnicity is a variable, socioeconomic status, test scores, age, and teacher experience are all variables. People differ on these characteristics. For example, gender may be male or female, ethnicity may be different, socioeconomic status may be different, age may be different, teacher experiences may be different. So these are all the variables. So now move on towards some types of variables. So the very first type is nominal variable. So what are nominal variables? A nominal variable is also called a categorical variable because the values include two or more named categories. So in these type of variables, we named the categories, we make the categories. For example, the word nominal comes from the Latin word for name. Nominal variables include sex. We can say the gender, that is the male or female. Employment status, full-time, part-time, or unemployed. Marital status, like marital status is a variable, and we make categories like who are married, who are divorced, and who are single. And type of school, for example, public, private, charter. For identification purposes, nominal variables are often represented by numbers. For example, the category male may be represented by the number 1 and female by the number 2. So we basically, in order to measure these variables, we assign numbers to the categories. Like we assign number 1 to the male category and number 2 to the female category. Then comes ordinal variables. Ordinal variable not only classifies person or objects, it also ranks them. In other words, ordinal variables have as their values rankings in order from highest to lowest or from most to least. So apart from classifying into groups, in ordinal variable we give ranks to certain groups. See the example. For example, if 50 students were placed into 5 reading groups, like we made 5 reading groups, 50 students, each group contained 10 students. Representing a different reading ability, a student in reading group 1 would be in the highest achieving group, and a student in reading group 5 would be in the lowest achieving group. Like we make ranks that the student who is reading in group 1 would be highest achiever, and the student who is reading in group 5 would be lowest achiever. Rankings make it possible to make comparisons. For example, to say that one student is achieving at a higher level than another student. Class rank is another example of an ordinal variable. Although ordinal variables permit us to describe performance as higher, lower, better, or worse, they do not indicate how much higher or how much lower. In other words, intervals between ranks are not equal. Like intervals between each rank are not equal. The difference between rank 1 and rank 2 is not necessarily the same as the difference between rank 2 and rank 3. So see, we have made 5 groups. So the difference between the performance of the 1 and 2, 84, 81, the difference between 81 and 77 is not the same. The interval between 77 and 75 is not the same. The interval between 75 and 70 is not the same. So in ordinal variables we rank the groups, but we do not get the equal intervals, equal difference. Then comes interval variables. An interval variable has also values that are ranked in order, but its values also represent equal intervals. So in ordinal variables we do not have the equal intervals, but here in interval variables we have the equal intervals. Score on most tests used in education research, such as achievement, aptitude, motivation, and attitude tests, are treated as interval variables. When variables have equal intervals, it is assumed that the difference between a score of 30 and a score of 40 is essentially the same as the difference between a score of 50 and a score of 60. And the difference between 81 and 82 is about the same as the difference between 82 and 83. Interval scales, however, do not have a true 0 point. For example, what is true 0 point? If Ronald's science achievement test score is 0 on an interval scale of 0 to 100, his score does not indicate the total absence of science knowledge, nor does Gyana's score of 100 indicate complete mastery. Without a true 0 point, we can say that a test score of 90 is 45 points higher than a score of 45, but we cannot say that a person scoring 90 knows twice as much as a person scoring 45. Then comes ratio variables. A ratio variable has equal intervals in rank order, and it contains a true 0 point, like height, weight, time, distance, and speed are some examples of the ratio variables. The concept of no weight, for example, is a meaningful one. Because of the true 0 point, we can say not only that the difference between a height of 3 feet 2 inch and a height of 4 feet 2 inch is the same as the difference between 5 feet 4 inch and 6 feet 4 inch, but also that a person 6 feet 4 inch is twice as tall as one who is 3 feet 2 inch. As another example, the total number of correct items on a test can be measured on a ratio scale, that is, a student can get 0 items correct. A student with 20 items correct has twice as many correct answers as a student with 10 items correct. So here we can say that a person getting 0 or a person getting 20 answers correct, we can say that the student getting 20 correct answers as compared to the student who is getting the 0, because we have a true 0 point. Then comes quantitative and qualitative variables. Quantitative variables exist on a continuum that ranges from low to high or less to more. Ordinal, interval, and ratio variables are all quantitative variables because they describe performance in quantitative terms. Examples are test scores, heights. So the examples are these are some examples, because we measure the test scores, heights, and speed or age of any person in terms of quantity, so in terms of number. So these are some quantitative variables. Nominal variables do not provide quantitative information about how people or objects differ. They provide information about qualitative differences only, because if a person is male or female, it's not telling the quantity, it's telling the quality, that what the person is gender wise, it's male or it's either female. They provide information about qualitative differences only. Nominal variables permit persons or things that represent different qualities, for example eye color, religion, gender, political party, but not different quantities. Then comes dependent and independent variables. So what is the dependent and independent variable? The dependent variable in experimental study is the variable hypothesized to depend on or to be caused by another variable, the independent variable. So dependent variable has a cause by independent variable. Like for example, we have, is there an effect of reinforcement on students' attitude towards school? Effect of reinforcement on students' attitude. You probably had little trouble identifying attitudes towards school as a variable, because reinforcement is hypothesized to affect student attitudes towards school. Attitude towards school is the dependent variable in this example. It is also a quantitative variable because it is likely measured on a numerical scale. For example, strongly favorable towards school could be assigned a higher number, whereas strongly unfavorable could be assigned a lower one. So see how we identify the dependent independent variable, because the attitudes, student attitudes, are dependent on the reinforcement, like the positive or negative reinforcements, the effects of reinforcements causes change in the students' attitudes. So in this way we can say that the students' attitudes are dependent variable and reinforcement is independent variable. And so this dependent variable is quantitative as well, because how we can measure the attitude towards school by assigning a number that maybe who are strongly favorable with a higher number, and who are unfavorable could be assigned a lower one. So in this way we can measure the quantitative variable. So these are some types of variables which we are concerned while doing a research. We have studied in this lecture about the construct, what is a construct and what are variables. So this is the reference of a book. You can take a guide from this book as well. So this is all about today's lecture. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.